Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
All right. Welcome to the 12 o'clock show with Mayor Joe. And joining us today is State Senator Jay Hottinger. Hi, Jay. How are you doing today?
Great, Mayor. Good afternoon. Nice to see you.
It's very nice to see you. I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us today. I actually was surprised. I was at a meeting about Intel about an hour ago, and I wasn't sure if
Intel,
you
is there
all.
something going on with it? Is there something
Yeah,
happening with Intel?
it's been in the news. It was, in the back page section or something like
I've missed that.
that. It was a very interesting meeting. Well, first of all, why don't you just tell us a little bit about, what you know of the Intel and how it's going to impact Licking County?
Wow, how many hours do we have for this, Mayor? So, look, there's a lot I could say. I'm sure your constituents, the residents in Reynoldsburg, and your listeners know a lot of this. But there's a couple of things that I can say about it that continue. I just scratch my mind because so a lot of your residents, Mayor, probably have been to the Honda plant, have had a chance to. They know people that have worked there, or they've toured there, or they've gone through that. If not, it's an amazing experience. Honda is almost like a city in and of itself. Some of your residents may be familiar with Wright-Patterson Air Base, down in the Dayton area, and so this Intel project is going to be larger than both of those combined. And to me, that is just really amazing. So it's going to be the largest economic development project in Ohio's history. It will be the largest economic development project in North America in 2022. And when construction starts on that, they're publicly saying that they'd like to break ground, by the end of this year. I suspect that by this summer, they actually will have broken ground. And when the dirt starts moving, I think it's going to continue to move for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And so, there's going to be I think the initial number is 4,000 employees that are going to be there, average salary $135,000. The lowest salary is going to be $85,000. And they're building 2 fabs. And ultimately, over the next 8 to 10 years, they expect to have 5 or 6 fabs there. And so what is starting off as, a $20 billion investment will be north of $100 billion. And that, they will have somewhere between, 8 to 10, maybe 12,000 employees there. And Mayor, the other thing that I think is really exciting about it is that not only are those jobs, but there's going to be several thousands of construction jobs that will be starting again this year, and I think they're going to be working for the next decade right there on site. And so this is not going to be kind of like a one and done, or something that's going to be started in a couple of years. Now we're finished, and most of these jobs, these construction jobs, are going to be in the trades, in union trades. And so I think there's going to be enormous opportunities, but with that are some great challenges as well. One more thing on the opportunities. So right now there are about 50 suppliers in the state of Ohio, Intel suppliers in the state of Ohio, and they're dispersed around the state of Ohio. The other thing that I think is really exciting about this, and it's been talked about a little bit, is that there may be as many as 30 to 40 additional Intel suppliers following them here, locating here in the state of Ohio. And some of those will have to be in central Ohio. Some of those have to be within, like 3 minutes of the plant, and some of them, and there's another ring that have to be within 5 or 6 minutes of the plant. And then there's some, based on what they're supplying to Intel, can be dispersed around the state of Ohio. So I think there's great opportunity, not just for central Ohio, but really kind of like the Honda model, where you can have, there may be, 60 or 70 of the 88 counties that might have Intel suppliers that are, have a presence. And so I really think it's an example of a rising tide. The other thing is, Mayor, is that it's exciting for Central Ohio. It's certainly exciting for Ohio, but from a national standpoint, I think it's really big news. And so, you go back 30 years ago, and 40% of the chips were made domestically here in the United States. Today, it's 12%. And so chips are in everything. They're in our cell phones, they're in our laptops, they're in our televisions, they're in our appliances, they're in military equipment, they are in medical equipment, medical supplies. There are hundreds of them in our vehicles. And so chips today touch every American in 21st century America. And so you can't live in America today and not be impacted by chips. And the fact that only 12% of those are produced now in the United States of America, I think is a little alarming. So we're relying on many instances, China. We're relying on a number of countries around the world to supply really something that's not a luxury, but a necessity today. And so reshoring that back into the United States, I think, is a real win for America. And the fact that Ohio is going to play a crucial role in that. And in a matter of a few years, there in Western Licking County and in New Albany, we'll have the world's largest chip manufacturer. And I think it's really exciting. It's exciting for young people. 10 years ago, a young person, who was looking for a career in maybe the tech sector didn't have a lot of opportunities in Ohio, and certainly in Central Ohio. And so, now not too far from you, Mayor, very close to you, actually, Amazon has the largest fulfillment center in the world. We have Facebook, now Meta. They're going to be making an announcement soon where they're doing an expansion, very soon. Of course, we have Google. And, there's so many exciting things happening. And, so not only will, within a stone's throw of Reynoldsburg, where you have the largest fulfillment center in the world, in the Amazon center that's there in Etna, but you're going to have, and your young people who will be graduating will have opportunities to work for the largest chip manufacturer in the world as well, at some really good wages. And so for every job that's going to be at Intel, they are anticipating 5 to 6 ancillary jobs. And so that poses some challenges, of course, and there's challenges on the workforce side, challenges on housing, of course, challenges on infrastructure. But this is going to keep all of us, public sector and private sector, in Central Ohio, busy for at least the next decade. But I think it's exciting.
So earlier today, the meeting that I was a part of is from their, Licking County Task Force. And so we had representatives from the township level, mayors, city managers, a lot of local, and we actually had a face-to-face meeting with some of the representatives from Intel. These are going to be the people that will be working on this project. And a lot of the same things you just mentioned, specifically the challenge side. I think everybody around our group that was there was 100% supportive, ready to do this. But there were the questions of housing. There were the questions of, the infrastructure, and each community has its own unique problems with that. Obviously in Reynoldsburg, housing is not as much of an issue in terms of additional housing. We've added a lot over the last couple of years. Our concern is, Mink Road, which is, at our eastern borders, is going to be the road, 10 miles up that road is where this thing is going to be located at. And so, right now it's a 2-lane road. How does that change to make sure that, there's no bottleneck or, and anything that's leaving that particular area to us? But what was really nice to see, and this was, all the way from Heath to Hebron to Granville, New Albany, we had all the representatives there. Intel was very, very understanding of how each community wants to retain what is special about their own community, while at the same time providing an option for, managed growth, whether that be housing, whether that be, some of the quality of life things, the fun stuff to do, because we know with all of the workers here, whether there be construction workers or the Intel workers themselves, they're going to want to, everybody loves their job, but there's more time in the day than just your job. So they want to make sure that there's other things for everybody to do. And as you know, being in Licking County for so long, Licking County is a very unique county. It's got a little bit of everything. So everybody's going to have an opportunity. If they want to live in a more metropolitan area, they can do so. If they want to live more in multifamily, they'll have that option. If they want to live and, be on a couple of acres of land, while that may be limiting, disappearing a little bit, you still have that opportunity. So it's a great opportunity. Reynoldsburg, even though we're on the kind of the far edges of it, we're excited. And like I said, the cooperation from Intel so far has been fabulous. Really good information to get to us.
Well, Mayor, I appreciate that. And look, this Intel project has literally added a few hours a week to my already busy schedule. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not dealing with something Intel related. And there's a lot that has to be done. There's a lot of infrastructure stuff that has to be done prior to. We have to put infrastructure in place. The legislature just approved, I think it was 85 or 87 million dollars to help with local infrastructure. And that's just to be able to help Intel get the infrastructure put in. And so you mentioned Mink. Mink is going to be, a 5 or 6 lane superhighway within the next decade. And so there's going to be about $2 billion of infrastructure improvements that are going to be made, starting at, 270. Some of this work already needed to be done anyways. So this is not just purely Intel related, but, work at 270 and 161, the interchanges there, widening of 161 to in Franklin County up to the Licking County border. So there's going to be about $1 billion of infrastructure from 270 to the county border, and then about another $1 billion of infrastructure improvements inside Licking County. And Mayor, I don't want to sugarcoat this, because there are going to be challenges, and there's going to be obstacles, and there's going to be some headaches. You don't have the largest economic development project in Ohio's history, and the largest in North America this year, and not have some pains and some growth pains. And so it is going to be a significant game changer. But Mayor, one of the things that I've spent my whole entire career trying to do is to create a climate and an atmosphere that is trying to attract these types of jobs, trying to attract good paying jobs. And so this isn't like, putting in, a big Walmart store. This is significant. I don't think most people understand the size and scope of it, but you spoke about the bottleneck issue. One of the reasons that this particular location was chosen is because it has multiple access points. It has multiple ways. And so it's not far, of course, from 70, but it's right off of 161, of course. And so there's going to be access points into the Intel facility from Beach Road, from Mink, from Jug in 62. And so having the multiple access points is important. So to kind of reduce that congestion, reduce the bottlenecks. But look, I deal with the folks at Intel every few days, and they have a great team, and I know that they want to be great neighbors. And in fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm going out to visit their site as part of a local delegation, going out to the Phoenix area, Chandler, to take a look at that location there. And, I'm told that once that facility went in there, after that went in, people built $1 million homes right across the street. And so I know they have a history of being great neighbors where they are at, whether that would be in Oregon or California or Arizona. I certainly expect that to be the case here. They've just made a significant big investment in education as well. And I'm excited about that. But what I want to be able to do is be able to have some conversations with some people outside of Intel, with my Uber driver, what did this mean, when this came here, what kind of neighbors are they? And and I think that will allow us to be able, me and others that are going out, to be able to collect, some firsthand knowledge of, maybe what went right or maybe didn't go these other areas, and bring back those, and maybe hopefully be able to put some of those into some best practices here. But, working with the local officials, I think, the work of whether it's mayors or township trustees or county commissioners or state legislators or congressmen, all of us, are vested in this. And, I have the utmost confidence, Mayor, in Ohio's economic development experts, the people who played a key role in landing this. I wouldn't trade those for any others in any other state. That's how much confidence I have in them. And there's a lot at stake riding on this. And there's a lot of people's reputations that are at stake on this. And I fully have the utmost confidence in Intel and in our elected officials from the state level down to the local level, and our economic development, the jobs creators, and the economic development team. I think they're up to task, and I think that we're going to be a model of, first of all, a message to Intel that you made the right choice, but also a model to the rest of the state for when other projects emerge, and to the rest of the country of like, this is how it's done. And so there's those challenges, but you're going to be a part of being the solutions, and our school superintendents, and working with folks on the housing side, making certain we have housing for these folks, and for the workforce, for the thousands of laborers who are going to be coming in and going to be working here for the next decade. Those are all issues that are going to be on elected officials' plates for the next several years. But I know you and others are certainly up to it.
I appreciate that. And for any of those businesses, the 30 or 40 additional ancillary businesses that are looking for a location to settle outside of this, give me a call here in Reynoldsburg. I'd be happy to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely, Mayor.
So had to have that plug in there. Now you're on spring recess right now. Is that correct?
That's what they say.
As far as recesses can be considered.
Yeah, I only have to be here 3 days this week, and then in Tuscarawas County twice. So we're just kicking back and relaxing.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what it's like. So when you're back in chambers, are there any, what are some of the topics that might be coming up at the State House, that you guys are going to be working on to kind of move the state forward as we move through the rest of this year?
I think, so, I mean, first of all, I think that's yet to be determined. So first of all, and maybe we'll touch on this here in a few minutes, but, the congressional redistricting stuff has really thrown a monkey wrench. This was thought would have been resolved, months ago. So we have a capital improvements budget bill that initially we thought we were going to pass in March, and then we said we were going to pass it in April. Now we've bypassed even talking about doing it in May, and now it's we're talking about the first week of June. And so, capital improvements budget bill that we thought would be done in March now won't be done until early June, at the earliest. But a lot of other projects, other priorities have been certainly impacted by the fact that, we've now had 3 or 4 instances where the Supreme Court has struck down the legislative lines as unconstitutional. And so having to go back and redraw those. And so that's not just, some of the legislators that are involved in that, but staffs that, that aren't working on state time, that are involved in that as well. And so the biggest thing between now and the summer recess, which will take place sometime in probably middle of June, is the capital bill. But hopefully, and it may even be yet today, that there may be some movement and determination on what's happening on the state legislative lines.
Well, I think, as somebody who's obviously run for office before, I could only imagine what it would be like that, you don't, if you're a public servant and you're ready to run and you just don't know, is it this district? Is it that district? Which one are we looking at? So I sympathize with a number of those out there that, are truly just they want to serve the public, and they're just kind of, twiddling their thumbs waiting to see how all this turns out.
We look, I don't know of anybody who relishes the situation that we're in. Again, I think literally today, that's, it's not a facetious comment. I think possibly today we may see some announcement. I know nothing. Look, none of us know what 3, judges in black robes are going to say or do. But I think there's a chance that today maybe the federal courts step in and come up with a remedy, at least a short-term remedy, possibly. And when I say short-term remedy, I think maybe they will, on a short-term basis, say one of the maps is green lighted to go forward for 2 years. or maybe they say the existing maps that went into effect in 2011, making changes to that because there's been population shifts, maybe, making some to adjust for those, maybe saying keeping the existing maps in place for just 2 years, and then telling, the redistricting commission to go back at it and come up with longer term maps. But we're at a critical juncture, now where, I've already voted, for the statewide and the local races, and the legislative races, of course, haven't had their primaries, and that's going to have a second primary. And I think maybe the courts might tell us when that is. I'm hearing that it might be, August 2nd. But so we have both primaries to get through, and then of course general elections in the fall, and time is of essence. And so that's why I think the federal courts very likely may step in with some sort of at least short-term solution, today or this week.
Well, fingers crossed and stay tuned. Now, let's assume that all of that gets settled and we're back in session. Do you have any specific goals that you yourself are looking to do? Because I know that, while we're talking about people running for office and public servants, this is it for you for at least the foreseeable future. So I know that's probably got to be a relief, but also kind of strange given your long record of service. So is there anything that you're looking to kind of accomplish in this last year?
Well, there are a number of things, and that, why I always run, Mayor. And, I when I started 28 years ago here at the legislature, it was not I had no intention of being here this long. But, you just find that what you get accomplished and what's still on the to-do list never gets shorter. There's just more things that get added to it. And I've been fortunate to be able to have, a long career here, but also one that's been marked with, a lot of productivity, and a lot of things have been able to get signed into law. And a lot of people ask me, what's your biggest accomplishment? And, Mayor, I don't ever really have a good answer for that, because whenever I have a legislative success, I dwell on it for about a minute and a half, and then I brush it off my shoulder because I'm looking at like the next 10 or 12 things I need to get done. So I have a number of bills that are in various stages, that I would like to see over the finish line, that are either, pending here in the Senate or that have passed the Senate and pending in the House. But the two biggest things that I'm working on right now, the Capitol bill is big, and there's community projects and things that I want to get over the finish line. But the two biggest things outside of my individual bills that I'm working on is the Intel project. It's literally adding hours to my week. There are just an enormous number of things that we got to get done. There were promises that were made. There were commitments that were made. And, people forget this, is that, I live in Licking County. I represent, of course, Licking County. And the rest of the state really gets to look at the Intel project and observe from a distance and say, well, I hope it goes well, and I hope that they meet their housing needs, and I hope they handle the infrastructure, and I hope they have the workforce in place. Licking County, as the host county, bears all of the weight of that burden. And I don't want to say it's a burden, because it's also a huge blessing, but I feel that. And I think the elected officials feel that. And so Intel adds hours a week to my schedule of things that we need to get done. There's things we need to get done still legislatively. There's commitments that have been made to Intel and infrastructure things that need to get done. And while that's not my sole responsibility, as as a senior legislator and a leader, in the Ohio Senate, I feel the brunt of that. And again, since it's in my home county, so making certain that the Intel project is getting off to the start that it needs to get is really important. And then also we continue to have ARPA dollars, the federal dollars that have been coming down. I think by the end of April, I think we're supposed to get another, I think the number is 2.7 billion, I believe, put into our checkbook. And so making certain that, we still have some dollars that were unappropriated, ARPA dollars, and we have now this additional that's supposed to hit our checkbook, the state's checkbook, here in the next few days here before the end of April. And working with the administration, working legislatively to come up with a plan to to utilize those dollars in the most effective way that we can. And so those are the two things that are kind of absorbing, aside from, going to committees and, going to session. Those are kind of the two elephants in the room that will continue the balance of my term as a senator, which comes to a conclusion, in December at the end of this year. Those will be the two things that I'm most focused on.
Well, I've been asking this question a lot of all the elected officials that I've had. Everybody has their own process about how they determine how to vote on a particular something. So, you're getting ready to make your vote, and let's just say it's not I don't want to call it controversial, but it's not a no-brainer bill. There's different viewpoints, there's different sides to it. What kind of process do you go through to make that decision on how you're going to vote on a certain item?
It's a great question. So I try to follow what I call as a three-pronged test. First, it starts with listening. One, you have to listen. Two, you have to learn. So you have to have the ability to understand what you're hearing from people. So you listen, you learn, and then you lead. And so, and the leading, I think sometimes is the one that trips people up, because you can't be all things to all people, Mayor. And so, 5 people say you should do this and 5 people say you should do that, and then they're like, well, you went the other way. You didn't listen to me. And so you have to listen, you have to learn, and then you lead. And what I mean by leading is that you try to make the best decision with the information that you have at that time for what you think is going to be kind of you almost like this utilitarian point of view, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Okay. And so I don't make my decisions based on polling. I don't base my decisions solely on, I heard from 25 people, I represent 370,000 people. So I got 25 letters in the mail, and 20 of them said to vote this way and 5 said to vote the other way. I don't base my decisions entirely on, 3/4 of the people who contacted me on this said to vote this way, because I didn't hear from 369,000, 975 people, right? And so what you do is you listen, you learn, and then you lead. You make the decisions. I make the decisions from all the information that I get and I gather from multiple sources. And then I make the decision what I think is the best interest of the people I represent, recognizing that I can't make everybody happy. But the beautiful thing is about this process that we have in America, and it's certainly had its challenges of late, is that we have these things called elections. And so if I can't continually make decisions that are outside the scope and the parameter or the viewpoints of the majority of the people I represent, or they'll say, we don't think you listen very well, or we don't think you learn very well, or we don't think you lead very well, and we're going to replace you. And so every election cycle, I have to, and you have to, and anybody that runs for office has to say, here are the decisions that, here are the information that I had. And I don't expect everybody to agree with me, but anybody ought to be able to ask me, how did you arrive at your opinion on voting yes or no for this, or appropriating this fund or not on not that fund? They may not agree, but I ought to be able to give them a viable reason or rationale of why I did what I did. And 9 times out of 10, even when people don't maybe agree with your decision, I think they respect the fact that you took your job serious, you listened, you learned, and then you led. And so that's how we do it here. Absolutely. My last question is not the hardest question you've ever heard. Basically, what's the best part about being a state senator? You've had a lot of experience. Is there any one thing? And I mean, if it's food related, because you get to go to all the festivals, I'm fine with that. But what do you think is the best part? So look, I ran for office, Mayor, when I was 21 years old to run for city council. And I ran for one reason and one reason only, and that was to improve the quality of life of the neighborhood that I grew up in. I saw problems, and I ran because I wanted to solve those problems. And so I think it's true whether you're conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican, almost everybody I know, not everybody, but almost everybody I know runs for public office because they want to help, they want to serve, they see a problem in their community, and they want to step up and lead. And so the best part of my job is being able to help, you hope, thousands or tens of thousands of people. So that's why I first ran 31 years ago, and that's why I've continued to run, for the past 30 years, is because I wanted to make a difference in my community. And so that's number one. Number two, I really do love the diversity of my job. And so I tell people that, being a legislator or being a senator, you're not really an expert on anything. Now there's areas that I know a lot more about than I know of other areas. So I know a lot about finance. I know a lot about budgeting. I know a lot about, insurance issues. I know a lot about children's issues, at-risk youth issues, but the diversity of my job allows me to know a little about a lot. And so you contrast that with, somebody who just they have an expertise in one particular issue. And God bless those people. They're great. We need them. But I tell people that I have attention deficit disorder because I don't like dealing. I love insurance issues, but I don't want to deal with insurance issues, 5 days a week, 8 or 10 hours a day. While I love dealing with those issues, I love the fact that I get to deal with, in any given day, a dozen or 2 dozen different issues. And so the diversity of the job compounded with the real reason of being able to trying to make a difference, for your constituents. Remember, Mayor, I said, I've spent my whole entire career trying to improve the economic development climate in the state of Ohio. I subscribe to a belief that says government doesn't create jobs, but we do play a pretty powerful job in creating a climate and environment that's conducive to jobs. And there's nothing that is more satisfying for me than to see constituents and see families, see moms and dads go out and get a job. You talk about being pro-family. I consider myself a pro-family legislator. The most pro-family thing that there is to help a mom or dad get a job where they're able to come home and tell their children or their spouse, guess what? Dad got a job today, or mom got a job today. That's pro-family. That's what, good public service is about. And, looking back over the last 30 years of my career, I've been able to play a small part of that, but I think the economic opportunities for Ohioans and Central Ohioans and people in Reynoldsburg and Licking County are far greater today than what they were when I first started. And that's something that I can't take sole credit for, but I'm certainly excited and honored to have played a role in.
I appreciate that. Now, we did get one question emailed, and you kind of already talked a little bit about the maps and things like that. Do you have any idea as far as, I guess probably the best way to kind of going through this question here, a lot of money is being spent on the 2 different primaries and things like that. Is there something moving forward that you would like to see to maybe prevent something like that from happening again? I know you can't stop courts from doing what courts do, and obviously people have different opinions, but there's going to be a lot of money spent on 2 different primaries. And I don't know if there's anything that we could have done to avoid some of this.
Look, I mean, I don't think anyone wanted to have it in a situation where we had 2 primaries. And so it's going to cost the state probably $28 million. And that's real dollars. That's significant. Those are dollars that could have gone to a myriad of other problems that we have. And so I don't know anybody who says they're happy about this and want to defend that. I will tell you, Mayor, that the whole redistricting thing is really complex. I've been involved in it to various ways now for 3 redistricting processes during my time that I've been here. And, a lot has been made about the constitutional amendment that, voters overwhelmingly approved. So what a lot of people don't recognize is that, one, that amendment that was significantly voted on and ratified by the voters and in Licking County and across the state of Ohio was written by the current Senate President, Matt Huffman. He wrote that language the legislature voted to put that on the ballot for the voters to approve. It was backed by the Ohio Democratic Party. It was backed by the Ohio Republican Party. And it was backed by labor interest, it was backed by business interest, and it passed overwhelmingly. It passed overwhelmingly because both parties were for it. And there was no organized opposition to it. And so the amendment that was drafted by Senate President Matt Huffman was ratified by a large number of Ohioans. One of the problems with that, Mayor, is that, one of the what I thought was aspirational was saying that the district should mirror what the statewide vote total is. And so the difficulty with that is that we also have constitutional requirements, both in the Ohio Constitution and the US Constitution, of how often communities can be split and how often counties can be split and compactness. And so, it's hard to draw. I tell people you can't have compact and you can't have competitive. You can have one or the other, but it's really hard to have compact and competitive at the same time. And I'm not trying to be partisan here. The reality of it is that in Ohio, Democrats largely live in 8 communities. Most Democrats in Ohio live in 8 communities. Majority of them live in 3 communities. Okay, so 82 of the 88 counties are what would we call red counties or Republican counties. And so to have a compact district that's also competitive is virtually impossible to do. So the reality of it is that the amendment that was drawn up and approved by the legislature and then by the voters of Ohio is in conflict with some of the compactness and requirements of the US Constitution. And so that's what the courts are trying to work through. We're ultimately going to have districts. Unfortunately, I think they're probably only going to be in effect for 2 years, and then they're going to have to go back at it. But the other thing is that this is not unique to Ohio. It's litigated, and so Republicans are litigating in blue states, and Democrats are litigating in red states. And it's just kind of the hyper-partisan divide that I think we are here in Ohio and across the country. But the same thing that's happening here in Ohio is happening in Illinois and California and New York and in blue states as well. And hopefully we can get to a better process, but it doesn't seem like we've quite arrived there yet.
I agree. I think, my only comment on it is, we're doing and by no means am I comparing the two, we're doing our ward redistricting here in the city of Reynoldsburg. So that's time for us. And so we're doing it. And, the joke was, what if we were to, I don't want to call it gerrymander, but it is what it is, gerrymander the city of Reynoldsburg to favor one particular party as opposed to another particular party. And then obviously we know we would get pushback from that. And then there's conversations, all right, well, if you're doing it here and you're upset, but what about the state, when sometimes some of those state districts look a little wonky all the way across. And I think a lot of that, unfortunately, between that and campaign funding in general, has led to a lot of division within the country. I think it has definitely pushed candidates for whatever reason to go to a little bit further of their extremes of their parties for representation purposes. And then you throw the money into it on top of that and where that's coming from and how that influences things. But I agree. I would like to think that something kind of gets back to where, when I was teaching, I always kind of ran it with, you got about 10% of the population that, supported Republicans. And these are the people that make phone calls, put yard signs out, write letters. And then on the other side, you have about another 10% that are doing the same thing for the Democrats. And then you have 80% of the rest of everybody that's sitting in between that has a little bit of like for each side, depending on what the issue is. And that's where most of the country is, in my opinion. It doesn't always reflect that in the state house or in Congress. There's other things, and I'm not naive enough to understand that. But I think more people have more in common than the division that is usually represented out in the media.
Yeah.
The state representatives and legislators and senators that I've talked to on both sides of the aisles, I think we all get along. We all understand we're here for a common cause, but sometimes that gets lost in things that really don't have anything to do with what we're trying to accomplish for the betterment of our communities.
I think that's well said, there used to be a time where you had the elections, you had the politics side of it, and then the election was over, and then you went into the policy mode. And it's harder and harder, I think, now for some people to shift into policy mode, and they just kind of stayed locked in the political mode. They stay locked into a campaign mode. And Mayor, again, it's complex, and part of the complexity does center around the fact that so many Democrats in the state of Ohio live in such few isolated areas. And so, when the redistricting task force was traveling around the state of Ohio, there were a couple of people that stood up and said, if you want to see what's the matter, why there's gerrymandering problems, look at the 31st Senate District, which happens to be my district I represent. And so I have all of Licking, all of Perry, all of Coshocton, all of Tuscarawas, and 90% of homes. The reason why I don't have 100% of homes is because that would put me over the threshold, the population threshold. So I have 5 whole counties that make up my district, okay? And they happen to be Republican counties, but you know what? You substitute you don't want me to have Perry County and you want to give me Knox County, the district just became more Republican. You don't want me to have Tuscarawas County, you want me to have Muskingum County, the district just became more Republican. The problem is that when 82 of the 88 counties are red today, and there's more Republicans living in 82 of the than in 82 of the 88 counties, you begin to understand how really hard it is to make some districts competitive. And so you want to make my Senate district competitive, you have to really gerrymander my district to draw certain ways, draw into the city of Columbus, to make my district competitive. And so if you live smack dab in some rural county and you're surrounded by 15 other rural counties that are solidly Republican, there's nothing you're going to do that's going to be able to make that a competitive district, short of drawing a line into Cincinnati and creating a bubble, or drawing a line into Cleveland, or drawing a line into Columbus. And so if your goal is competitiveness, you're going to have the districts are going to look more gerrymandered under. So the question is which do you want more? Do you want compactness or do you want competitiveness? And it's a trade-off, to be honest with you.
Well, I do appreciate your time. We do have one question. If you got time for just one additional question that we got online, go ahead.
It says, will there be a significant expansion of John Glenn International Airport due to the Intel project?
I think that's a great question. I've heard those rumors. I will tell you that I have not had any conversations with anybody in any official capacity. I think if there's an expansion at John Glenn, it's not going to be specifically because of Intel, but you realize now Ohio is Columbus is now the 14th largest city in America. We're larger than Boston. I have the opportunity to travel around quite a bit. And, when I land at Port Columbus, whether I'm leaving or taking off from Port Columbus, it feels to me like a top 50 city, the airport size. And there's going to be more and more people coming to Columbus. Yes, because of Intel, but I think because of lots of other reasons as well. And, Columbus is a very large city. And I think our airport is small compared to the size of our city. And so while I've not been told that specifically, I'm presume that someone is already making those plans, because I can't imagine a future for Columbus that doesn't entail an expanded John Glenn International Airport.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm sure that we'll see each other again as we kind of go through this joyous Intel experience, but I do appreciate you coming on the show today. And again, enjoy what little spring recess you have at the State House. So thank you very much again, Senator Jay Hottinger.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you too.
All right, for everybody else, we are hiring here in Reynoldsburg. We're not Intel, but we're still hiring. We're looking for a couple of things. We're looking for some people for mowing, some ball field maintenance, because one day it will actually not rain all the time. Right now it's sunny out. It's horticultural crew, facilities, all sorts of opportunities. If you're interested, please go ahead and check out our jobs page on our soon to be completely redesigned website. It'll be here sooner rather than later. I wanted to go over a couple of quick things for you. One, some of you may have seen an article in the This Week News that talked about some fireworks legislation. As you know, the state of Ohio passed a law that allowed for the use of commercial grade fireworks, as well as expanding the number of holidays that were allowed to shoot those things off. So my comments to the community is that if you have a strong stand on this one way or another, Please reach out to your members of council. They are going to be working through a process to figure out exactly what that will look like. Are there going to be any restrictions? Are there going to be limitations, time limits, things like that? But this is definitely something that council is going to want to hear about. You can find all of their email addresses on our city webpage under government. But again, take a look at those. Want to go over a couple of things for code enforcement now that this is getting a little nicer out. One, try and make sure you keep your sidewalks clear of overgrowth. So let's say whether it's grass or whether you've got some bushes that are close to the sidewalk, make sure you trim those up so people can walk freely all the way on those areas. Obviously, we're going to be very patient in the early season when it's raining and then not raining and things like that. If it rains and you can't get out there to cut it, we understand, but try as best as you can to get some of those things taken care of. Today is trash day for half the city. So for those of you out there, make sure you put your trash cans away and take them off the street when local waste comes in and picks those things up. And the other one I wanted to talk to you about is our sidewalk program. We all know that our part of our roads program is all of the roads that are going to be worked on, which I'll tell you here in a few minutes. What those are going to be worked on. We go through and evaluate the sidewalks of that area, and we make sure that those sidewalks are safe and even and not, not a trip hazard or anything else like that. So that's happening, but we only do a certain part of the city every single year with our roads program. So what happens with the rest of everything? So the rest of it is honestly, it is complaint driven. So if there's an area that if you're walking and you realize that there's a part of the sidewalk that isn't what it should be, that there's a trip hazard, things of that nature, please go ahead and report it to our code enforcement. Give us a call here at City Hall and let us know the address. So that way we can take care of it. Now, part of the issue with this is, and keep this in mind, is this is also something that residents have the responsibility for. So while you're looking at your particular sidewalk in an area where you live, keep in mind that also somebody may be looking at your sidewalk. So it's one of those things where, we do have to be mindful of our residents to make sure that we don't overburden them. But at the same time, there are a lot of issues with safety. So please, if you have questions about that or concerns, go ahead and shoot those emails to us here at City Hall through code enforcement or through my office. So speaking of roads, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about our roads program. So I talked last week about some of the major roads, Taylor Road Southwest, Canada Court, Cuthbert Court, Crofton Place, and some of those areas. So we're going to have a few other ones that are going to go up to City Council on Monday night. And those include Old High Banks Court, Reigate Drive, Davidson and Haft, which is that tiny little piece between Davidson and Haft that wasn't done the last time when that road was done as the YMCA was getting built. And then obviously we'll have a couple of other things. Our Graham Road pathway from the right by the Livingston House from Graham all the way on Graham from Palmer all the way to the 5-way. That'll be up for council as well. And an interesting thing that will be up there for residents of the Priestley area. So as you know, if you've been watching this show or if you've been paying attention to some of our community commissions, there have been a lot of concerns about speeding on Priestley Drive, so much so that a lot of the residents gathered together and talked to my office, filled out petitions, talked to their neighbors, and they actually have requested the installation of speed bumps. So if you have comments, either pro, for, or just want to know where they might be going, please come in and to City Hall on Monday night and let council know what your thoughts are. Priestley from Wagner to Quarry Park Drive is kind of a unique road. It's a little bit more narrow than most of the roads. So there tends to be either an additional amount of speeding or a perceived amount of speeding in that area. And a lot of residents have they've kind of reached their boiling point with that. So we've worked hard to come up with the best option. We had a couple of public meetings. We sent a number of letters out. We had a town hall, things like that to kind of get that information. So if you're interested in that, that's there. I do know that there are other areas of town, specifically Bryce Road north of Main Street, that have also started to ask questions about potential use of speed bumps in their area. I'm sure that if I were asked 10 people right now what you think about speed bumps, I'm going to get 10 different answers. But it's your opportunity to, this Monday night to come out to council and make your voice heard on those type of issues. We will have a list of all the roads that are going to be up for construction up in the next couple of days. It'll be on the council agenda that'll come out on Friday, but we're looking forward to getting that work done. And speaking of construction, yes, Main Street is still the wonderful joy that it is. I know I've seen plenty of comments on social media about how long it's going to take. And obviously the quick answer is it's going to be a while. The short version is right now we're working hard to finish up the Memorial Plaza. We're putting the concrete for the sidewalks in, and then that hopefully will be opened back up. We're waiting right now for AEP to finish all of the steps that they need to do to make sure that the transfer of those power lines from above ground to underground present the least issue with our residents. So that's their issue. They want to make sure that when they take these things down, that, you know, the city of Reynoldsburg doesn't lose half its power. So they want to make sure that that's done in the right way. Beyond that, you're going to start to see some other construction coming up from Jackson all the way really to Davidson, where you're going to see some of the kind of some retaining walls put in place and some additional sidewalk space, things like that. All of those things are going to go on, and all of it is weather depending. Hopefully, I think we've got a couple of good days of great weather coming up, so hopefully we can get a lot of work done in that area. But we do appreciate your patience. I will try and update you as best as I can on what's happening, when it's happening, and all of that right here on the show or on Reynoldsburg Connects, our email blast system, which just went out a couple of days ago. So again, if you're interested, go ahead to our website and you can go ahead and log on and register for that. We do have some Ohio transportation news. Again, if you haven't watched, you know, obviously work at 70 and 270 is going to be really pushed forward this year, followed by in 2025, Bryce in 70, work on that interchange. And then after that, you heard the senator and I even talking about some of the things for infrastructure, you know, the deal with the bottleneck area, you know, 256 and 70, and then also Taylor Road and 70 with the potential, and I think it's going to happen, an additional on and off ramp to 70 sometime in the next couple of years. That's been on Ohio Department of Transportation's agenda for a while, but I do think that because of Intel, it is going to speed that up. So please stay tuned to us for the most information. In the meantime, this weekend, I want you to drive on out if you want to come out to our Community Cleanup Day this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. You're going to have an opportunity to do all sorts of things, obviously dropping all of your papers and get shredding taken care of. You can donate some of your home goods and building materials to Habitat for Humanity. We're going to get some electronics disposal, a bicycle drop-off, flag drop-off, as well as some medicine pills dropping off as well. That'll be here from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. So we're looking forward to seeing you out here this weekend. Also wanted to give you an update on the flood grant process. We are still waiting to hear officially if we have gotten this grant, but I think we're in good shape. Part of the information that we have is we are going to have at minimum 4 very large public hearings. In areas where if you submitted information about flooding to FEMA from the public hearing or the public meeting that they had, they will obviously invite you, we'll invite through mail, we'll do social media, we'll do whatever we can to make sure everybody's aware of these 4 public hearings. We do not have any dates yet. We're waiting for the official word of everything, but keep in mind that is coming. So the next thing I want to bring up is our COTA bus rapid transit line. So COTA is working very hard to provide a rapid transit line from Columbus all the way out to Reynoldsburg, as far east as it can possibly go, that will allow for transportation in a much more efficient manner, allowing people to hop on the bus and get downtown if that's where they work, or if you live in the downtown area or Whitehall or Bexley and you're coming out to work in Reynoldsburg, it will allow you quick and easy transportation. And one of the designs, and keep in mind, this is not going to be what it officially looks like, but one of the designs they're looking at is actually very similar to this. This would actually be a center line on Main Street for the rapid transit line for the bus. And most of the, I guess you'd say most of the bus stops will actually be in the center of everything. So they're at about the 15 to 20% engineering phase. So if you're really curious about that, please let me know. We'll keep you informed, but we will have public hearings on that as COTA is moving forward with that to help allow for that transportation. The big reason that I'm enthusiastic about this project is access to jobs. A lot of members of the community in Central Ohio do not have reliable transportation to get to some of the jobs that they want to get to, specifically some of those warehouse jobs that we have out in Etna Township. So this will help allow them to get closer to those places of business so they can get some work in. So moving beyond that, I did want to show you a couple of things. We saw some questions. Again, this is right back to Main Street. I apologize, but this is what, in theory, everything is going to look like after the fact. So when the work is done, there's a little less brick in what ultimately will be there, but you will see the brick trailer, you'll see the concrete sidewalk, you'll see some street trees put in, and things that are a lot more sustainable. So it's going to be easier to take care of. I know one complaint that we've had is obviously some of the brick walls in the city and how they have not held up as well as we had hoped for the time. So we wanted to make sure that what we're doing in Main Street on Old Town, which will eventually extend all the way throughout, we'll have an opportunity to be sustainable so we can provide upkeep for all of those things. All right. So going on from that, we got some events this Friday night at Spangler parking lot. We have the Friday night nature night here at Spangler. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out our Parks and Rec page. On the 26th, we have Crafting with Cookie at the Senior Center. So check out again the Senior Center page for that. We also have the Reynoldsburg Community Association is accepting nominations for the 4th of July Grand Marshal. Obviously, they have to be somebody that's contributed in an impressive way here in the community of Reynoldsburg. But if you're interested in that, go ahead and check out their website as well. We also have, some of our big music reveals. We've talked about Morris Day and the Time. We've talked about Plain White Tees. And we're still waiting, as I'm giving somebody a dirty look, we're still waiting to announce that Thursday show. So hopefully we'll have that, all those I's dotted and T's crossed relatively soon so we can make that announcement. I think you're going to be very happy with it. Definitely, I think we wanted to make sure we hit all parts of our community with a great musical experience through that Tomato Festival, which will be here before we know it. So we're looking forward to that. Any questions? Anything come up so far?
We did, when you were talking about sidewalks, this
Yep.
came in, and it says, does the homeowner assume financial responsibility for sidewalk repair, or does the city take ownership of repair and placement?
Repair, as far as if the city has damaged it, then that is the city. So sometimes you may have like a water pipe or something along those lines that's in there and it cracks around the sidewalk. But outside of that, the sidewalk is the responsibility of the homeowner to maintain throughout. All right. Well, if there are any other questions, feel free and shoot them in the next 30 seconds while I'm wrapping up. Obviously, with the weather out that is nicer, these things need to go in their shopping cart containers, mostly because every time I go to a grocery store, my wife is very frustrated that I have to take 5 minutes to put shopping carts away, and they're not mine. So make sure you put those shopping carts away. It's just a nice little piece of thing that you can do for everybody out there. So that way, especially if the winds are out there, those shopping carts tend to get away from people and damage cars and stuff like that, which we don't want to do. We have our next guest next week is going to be the Truro Township Assistant Fire Chief. Brian is going to be here, so he's going to talk a little bit maybe about that fireworks legislation, talk about some things, some safety tips for everybody to partake in, and kind of get an update on what's going on with Truro Township. With that, thank you very much for a great show. Again, thanks to Senator Jay Hottinger for coming out and talking about Intel and its impact on all of our communities. And definitely, I'll keep you informed as we move forward on what information, how it's going to hit us specifically here in Reynoldsburg. All right, enough of the show. Have a great rest of the day. Go out in the sun, and hopefully it'll warm up as we get moving along. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day.